Hello, welcome. People is still arriving. People are a bit late, but the ones that arrive on time, sorry for the delay. But we are going to start now, okay? Well, my name is Judith Romera. I work at the team of Barcelona International Welcome. This is a program from Barcelona City Council. And we have a website with information for people coming to live and work in the city of Barcelona. There's a section about procedures that even though anybody likes procedures, is the part of the website that has more consults. Today we're going to talk about procedures. Yes, you have been to Barcelona to study, and maybe you are considering to stay. You are being infected by the virus of Barcelona. You have experienced that Barcelona is a great place, that maybe you haven't discovered that has job opportunities or have opportunities to develop your career or your project, and maybe you are considering how to stay. And to cover this topic, normally we are not expert on all the topics, and we have an expert today, which is Luis. Luis Williams, he's an economist by training. He has also an MBA from IESE, among other studies. And he's the co-founder and CEO of Entre. Entre is an online consulting firm specialized in procedures, in all the paperwork for investors, for entrepreneurs, for SMEs, and it's a young company, only 6 years or so, but has a very interesting model. But he's not going to talk that much on the company, but he's going to share with us the expertise about what you need to do, what you need to know if you want to stay in Barcelona. Even the people is arriving, we're going to close the door and we're going to start. So big applause to Luis.
Gracias, Judith. Está funcionando y esperamos. Wait, well, I'm in Spanish. Sorry about that. Just went onto the default. So, welcome everybody. Today we're going to be talking about everything boring, okay? Now, it might not seem that boring because it matters quite a lot to you guys. So, just before we kick off, I want to ask, if you are from the EU, could you put your hand up? Okay, so we've got a few EU nationals here. Non-EU? Let's go non-EU Europe first. Asia? Okay, I mean, Asia is like 2/3 of the world's population, so that makes sense. Passing on to North America. LATAM? Oceania? That was speculative. And Africa. Antarctica? Yeah, that would be really speculative. If I've missed anywhere and just skipped to Antarctica, I feel terrible right now. But guys, welcome. So today we're going to be talking about how you might be able to stay. One last quick question of getting the ring around, and then I am going to start by presenting the different options. So quickly, who here is currently studying? Hands up. Who here is not currently studying but is interested for other reasons? Okay, intriguing. I'm going to focus first off on everybody to do with studying because it's going to be potentially the most relevant for everybody here today. So, and then we'll open up for questions later. This presentation will be about 15, 20 minutes, and then we're going to open up to your questions. As I said earlier, to those who arrived really on German time, shall we say, basically, please launch the most difficult question you can think of. We are here to answer and help. So, you're looking to stay longer in Barcelona. You're trying to figure out how on earth do I stay here? So, two sides, European citizen. I won't dive into this too much. Basically, you're a European citizen, you can stay. You already have your NIA from your setup as a student here. You don't need any particular visa. You do need to get through and have a NIA Blanco, which is the white NIA, and then a green NIA, which is the resident one, if you want to stay and work in the long run. But basically, this is not an issue. Employers are not going to create an issue, ask for you having a visa, won't ask for any verification. This is the easy side. Non-European citizen, this is where we enter into some problems. So at the moment, as a student, How many of you here knew that you could work for up to 30 hours a week if you were master's or undergrad? Okay, most. How many of you knew that you could work as self-employed? Yeah, that's the bit which they don't mention too much. So actually, there are two different options of how you can work at the moment while you're still within your studies. You can work both under employment for 30 hours a week, or you can register as an autónomo por cuenta propia, which is for self-employment. And under that, theoretically, you're limited to 30 hours a week, although I'm not really sure how that in practice is enforced, and nobody in the immigration authorities have been able to explain it to me. So in practice, you can work self-employed. Now, critically, throughout all this, you need to maintain your studies and maintain everything ongoing. Now, this is the bit which many of you probably are already passing through. However, if you have interest in working and getting compatibility to be able to work alongside your studies, feel free to book in with any of the team. That's a very easy conversation that they can explain to on that. That's not a complex procedure. For now, I'm going to focus on the more complex parts. So, study residence authorization. This is the bit which you guys mostly already have. You can get a renewal. I'm going to skip over this. This will be in the slide deck if anybody have any questions over this, but seeing as you guys are already students, this isn't the most relevant part. As you knew before, previously you had to apply from your country of origin, and you can apply directly in Spain through the online application system. At the moment, you guys have the possibility of renewing your studies, moving on to masters through this, okay? Actually, is anybody looking to go on for further study here rather than looking to go straight into work? Anyone here looking for further study? Right, I'm definitely skipping over this onto the next part then. So, oh, that is quite trippy. So, main requirements. Look, as we know that for the tier and everything else, this is not relevant to European Union citizens. Critically, on almost every path we're going to show you, initially, at least for the first 12 months, you're going to need private health insurance. And that you are already admitted to an educational institution. So, now let's talk about work. First off, internship, practicas. So basically there are two different types of practicas, and in some way this visa has been subsumed by the employment visa. Why? Previously, to get an employment visa, you had to show that nobody else in Europe could do this job, which honestly seems like an utterly impossible thing to prove. What that generally meant was just hopping through random bureaucratic loops, but actually there's been quite a lot of reforms to make things easier for you guys. So this visa is less relevant than it was before, but I'm going to touch on it because there are certain nuances. Why? You can get an initial 6-month visa, potentially extendable up to 12 months, and it doesn't need to reach minimum wage. Why is this? It doesn't need to be full-time either, so you can potentially, post your studies, continue under Residencia para Prácticas. This means that, let's say you've got a really cool job opportunity, which you know is not going to be full-time initially, but might have a separate lower salary as agreed by the convenio between your university and you. Actually, who knows what a convenio is? Convenio entre universidades. Okay, please, help me. What is it?
Well, you need to contact your university, the career center, and also...
Oh, sorry. Apologies. I've just broken all the format here. Please, go again, because that's a perfect answer. Go, please. This is relevant for everybody.
Well, in my university, you need to contact the career center, and also you have to look for some job opportunities, and you select them, you apply, and then you tell your career center you apply, and they'll help you with the paperwork.
Exactly. So, Convenio de Prácticas is actually a remarkably simple procedure within Spain. And quite often, university departments are very flexible at helping you work around this to make sure you can land and continue. So please, talk to a university admissions department, talk to whichever internal body would be related to convenios. If you're looking for work, career offices can often help. Because under this, you can get a 6-month extension, 12-month extension, that's very easy. However, after the first year, if you want to continue Residencia abajo de Prácticas, so continuing under internships, it has to be a minimum wage job. The convenio cannot go beyond that first year under any circumstances. Critically, this visa also will never extend beyond 2 years. So this gives you a first couple of years, but it doesn't get you quite there. So what's the other option? Job search. if your university is an authorized Spanish institution under the list, critically, this is only applicable for undergrads and masters. This does not apply if you're in language school or anything at the moment. So everything I am showing at the moment is not relevant if you're doing like a 4-month language class or anything else. If you're interested to convert from that into work, what you might need to do is actually go and study a master's first and then convert across. Or otherwise, you are basically applying like anybody else who's not in their education. But if you're under undergrad, if you're under masters, this is valid. Now, the job search visa does not allow you to work. Now, that seems kind of stupid, right? Job search visa, but you can't work. Where does this logic come from? I was like, that's stupid. So, reason being is it's not actually that stupid. It has some really good logic behind it. What they're saying is, okay, guys, we know that in the short time frame under which you finish your degree, it's possible that you might not quite land a job immediately within that 2-month, 3-month window. Paperwork processing time might delay it. You might have the fact that you only get your final certificate from graduation, which allows them to sponsor your visa a little bit later. So, to remove the stress from it, they've created a job search visa, which is very similar to the non-lucrative visa in Spain. So non-lucrative allows you to stay and not work. That's mainly targeted on the retirees. But the job search visa basically says, okay, you can stay, and you need to show you've got minimum financial resources, so you need to have cash savings. This is a very important blocker, which can come in. But you can stay for up to 24 months. It can be shorter than that if you have less financial resources, but that's one of the biggest barriers on this. Basically, Spain wants to know that you're not going to be dependent on them. So if you can provide that you've got 30K or so in a bank account, you're fine. But if you don't have those sorts of financial resources, it's very important you sort out and land one of the other options first. This is why the Residencia para Prácticas comes into its own. Why? Let's say you don't have savings. Let's say, look, you got here, you put some of your savings together so you can do your master's here. You haven't quite landed a job, but you're close to it. But there's a startup which is willing to pay you for 20 hours, 30 hours a week on an internship, 500 euros. Well, if you get a convenio de prácticas, you can go and work at that startup for 6 months, which gets you the visa extension to then allow you to apply for the other visas that we're going to get onto now, for more permanent work or anything else. So those are the two potential paths under which you can go down to position yourself best to be able to stay, right? So these are, let's call it more transition visas, right? I will open for questions on all of these when I get to the end of the immigration side, and then we can pop back and forth between these, because then we're going to get onto the world, which is exciting, called tax. So, employment visa. Yeah, I know. It's I don't know how I chose this career. Guys, so on employment visa, having a formal job offer from a Spanish employer approved by labor authorities, what on earth does that mean in that bit of legalese? Basically, your employer needs to not have significant debts with the tax authorities. They need to not have issues with Social Security and not have any other sanctions for breaching anything else migration-wise previously, okay? Actually, that's an incredibly low requirement. So as long as they get approved and stamped through, they can approve you towards a visa. Now, quite a lot of firms may not even know that they can go through this process. So one thing you might get stopped by is they might be thinking of the old system. So one thing I highly recommend for any of you talking with an employer on this is like saying, by the way, if you need any guidance on this, if you need any help with approval on this so that you can help sponsor visas, I know people who can help out. These are the details. We've got lots of free informative information which you can ask from my team, and you can just share those informative blogs to explain to the employers. Because what could be quite often, you might have a 10-person firm who's never hired anybody outside of Spain, or anybody outside of the EU, and they assume it's really difficult. Sometimes the biggest issue is ignorance, right? It's not actually that it's that hard, it's just they think it's really hard, okay? But the employment visa, what's the caveats? Technically, the job needs to be in the same field or same area as you are studying. However, that is very broadly interpreted. So as long as it can be vaguely tied towards it, they will accept it. They don't create it as a barrier, they want to have it as something similar, okay? The other thing is it must pay minimum wage, but so must every job in Spain. So that's not a particularly hard additional thing. So the one thing I'd like you to take away from this is if you feel you're getting blocked by this, talk to the employer and ask them if they've actually gone through the process of doing it. Because many firms think it's harder than it actually is to process the visas. And if they've never done it before, they might be just worried out of ignorance. And maybe you could offer to pay for the costs of them getting registered or something like that to help make it easier if one of these employers is getting reticent or worried. Digital nomad visa. This is more likely if you're a student and you're currently working remotely for another country. This could be because you're registered as an autonomo here already, or you had an employment contract before you came out here, you continued working remotely for a limited company overseas. This has a higher requirement. You need roughly a 33,000 euro a year of income, but you can apply for the digital nomad visa, 3-year instant approval. Well, not instant approval, pretty quick. It's about 20 days, 30 days. Caveat, the employment visa is a little bit slow. So the employment and self-employment visa can take 3-6 months to actually process through, which is why the job search visa or the Residencia para Prácticas is sometimes very useful to enable you to get there. That's why these transitional visas are vital. However, the digital nomad visa, incredibly quickly. 20 working days, it's done. Critical part, you need to show experience. So this can't be just if you just finished your undergrad. That's not going to work. But if you were previously working, did your master's, and are continuing on, this is a very interesting eligible possibility if you already have an overseas contract worth more than 33K. 33, 34. They haven't announced the final figures for 2024 of the exact thresholds. That's why I'm giving you some couple of caveats, but roughly 33K. Now, highly qualified professional. Now, you might think, well, why on earth would I apply for this? Who's heard of the highly qualified professional, or the PAC, Profesional Altamente Cualificada, before? Okay, so this is only relevant really if we're talking, and these thresholds are going up, but 54, 60K or something on salary for managerial positions, or 40, 43K for scientists, okay? Under the highly qualified professional, the advantage of this visa is just like the digital nomad visa, it's really quick. By the way, guys, there's some space just around here if you want to slot in. So in terms of the approvals on this, it's got a similar requirement to show experience, work experience, and high qualifications. It's got a higher ability requirement, but on this one, 20 days and it's done. There's no need for transitional visas. Now this, obviously with that salary level, we're talking top 15%, 10% in Barcelona in terms of salary level. This is really for only probably those who've had 5, 6, 7 years experience before, are now doing a master's in a more senior field, and are looking at this sort of entry point for the highly qualified. Entrepreneurship. Now this is one lots of people talk about and like, hey, this is great, let's do entrepreneurship. This is the hardest visa to get, okay? This is the hardest one. There is another one which allows you to be self-employed and set up your own company. But this is the one which trips people up sometimes. So this allows you to work self-employed, setting up a limited company or as an autónomo. Usually, we would highly recommend set up a limited company if you do this route for a couple of reasons. Now, for this, you need to show something which is either creating jobs, has clear levels of innovation, could be a university spin-off which has won prizes. You need to show funds that you're able to support yourself. If you're not coming with already having awards, a couple of different awards on the founding team are coming into startup, you've not got people with 5, 10 years of experience in a really good field, and you've not got 100K, 200K to invest in your idea initially, this is not the visa for you. This visa, you might choose to do speculatively, seeing if they approve it, but there is a high rejection rate by ANISA, okay? So ANISA do not approve this frequently, okay? This is the one which lots of people talk about, but doesn't actually come in. So what's the one which is possibly more relevant? That we skipped a visa. So I don't have a slide on it, and apologies on that. There's the self-employment visa. Self-employment visa, very similar to everything we've just laid out, except you basically need to show your ability to support yourself. The entrepreneurship visa, you need to provide work for many. You need to show you're bringing innovation, something strong to the ecosystem. The self-employment visa, they just want to know you can support yourself. For this, we say a minimum of 12K that you can show of cash balance. My recommendation is 20K in cash minimum. Why? You need to show you can support yourself for a year. You need to show, which is a minimum into IPREM, which they call, which is roughly 8,000 euros. And then you need to show you've got enough money for the business you're looking to launch, right? Even if that's self-employed as a freelancer with some contracts, if you've got proven commercial contracts, that can also help. If I was thinking for different levels of ease of approval, employment, self-employment, digital nomad visa, highly qualified, entrepreneurship, roughly. It depends on all your fields. Of course, these are different areas. But in relative ease, that's what we're talking about. So, before I get onto taxes and what the best structure is to operate under, just checking. Yeah, that's it. Good. I'm going to open for 3 quick questions. So if anybody's got questions on the immigration side, because I know lots of the rest of you who are here have exactly the same question that you're thinking about. Thank you very much. Ignacio, if you could pass.
Is it possible to apply for visa for practice after business school?
Yes, it is.
Are you sure? Yeah.
So residencia para
Because everybody told me like it's not possible because business school it's private school, so you can't apply for that.
So you can get a collective agreement with your school, and you can get a residencia para práctica. Actually, this is an interesting one because in terms of relations. So if the convenio is recognized, and depending on the educational institution you're in and how it's recognized, yes, you can. The question being is whether you do residencia para prácticas, whether the convenio is acceptable. If the convenio is not acceptable, then you have to have something which has minimum wage. So it depends on the salary of the practicas. So if you're looking for, if your case is a one below minimum wage, it's possible the convenio could be rejected on that one. So your current situation is you've got potentially a bridging offer which is less than minimum wage, I'm guessing, but you can't necessarily get a convenio which would be accepted for residencia para prácticas. Is that a fair summary? Which school are you at?
Huh?
What school?
GBSB. GBSB Global.
Global Business School Barcelona. Okay, GBSB. Okay. One thing which is worth... Does GBSB have any convenios de prácticas at the moment?
Like they provide like career fair, like these things. They helps with practices, but during your education. Because they, for example, reject some contracts, like if you get the internship now, and they told you like you need to have 6 months to do your internship.
Yeah.
But like they told it in January, okay, the company told it, and our university like told it, no, we won't like sign this contract because it's still the end of July, but our residence is still like the end of June. So just 1 month.
If you're
and they rejected.
Have you had a practica before?
Yes.
That can be the issue because there's a maximum limit on the number of months that you can do of practicas, often under the convenios of your university. But you haven't had it. No, it wasn't officially registered. Ask them for the exact details. Book in a call with the guys there because there's 2 different possibilities. I don't know exactly how GBSB works internally. It could be that they do not do and do not pledge towards any convenios for students who are after their graduation, right?
Yeah, but
they
like...
do. Oh, so.
There is also like the thing that we have the study, for example, till the end of summer, but residence permit we have till like the end of June. It's also like something wrong, I think.
So your residence permit, you're technically able to stay and reapply it up in the 3 months after the end of your residence permit, but because they haven't got an extension towards it, they're not considering the residencia para prácticas. What you should be able to apply for is get a residencia para prácticas, which should give you the extension from that for another 6 months from June to the end of December on the grounds of having an internship contract. But they can't sign the convenio until you've got the residencia para prácticas. So what I would recommend, download just the email that you've got, literally the PDF of the response back, the different offers within that. Ask them what convenio they usually issue. If you bring that PDF, those sets, and just check with the guys, they can run through the different options there might be on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because Residencia para Prácticas has this issue because you have an interaction between the different universities. And also because this is a fairly recent change, which previously came in on the extension of Residencia para Prácticas, there are potentially parts of miscommunication. Kind of chicken and egg. Which one do I have first? Do I need to get the residencia, do I need to get my contract to be able to get the offer, or do I need to have the convenio to then be able to get the extension of my visa? In principle, they need the convenio to get the extension of the visa, and that might be where they're being blocked. But if you book in, they'll explain that in a half-hour call with no issue. There, we've got one more there, and then I'm going to take one from over there. And then we're going to open up for plenty of other questions later. It's just to give a little break from the logic. Logic? A lack of logic, maybe. Please.
Thanks. For the employment visa, you said that you need to have like an offer job. Is there a minimum salary that you need to for the offer? And you said that some companies are worried to make the papers and all the traffic that they have to do. So I can offer myself to pay the lawyer or to do that.
Yeah, so offering to pay it and everything else, I recommend as a last step. That's not something which, in theory, it should be on the employer's side, everything else. But what I'm saying is it's a practical thing which can unblock. What's the minimum salary? The minimum salary for the regular employment visa is just minimum wage. El sueldo mínimo internacional, which is now with the adjustments coming in like 15,700, 800 a year, euros a year, gross, pre-tax.
And for how many times that the tramits get longer? For example, if a company needs someone to enter, like right now, and the papers late like 3 months.
This is why the recommendation usually is go for job search visa first.
Okay.
Because the job search visa can buy the time of the bridge. So one of the biggest things, unless you apply, let me take a step back. One of the critical things you need to be able to get any of those visas is proof that you've graduated. If you've not graduated, they often won't issue the visa. So one conditionality they have in Spain is that you complete your educational studies. If you don't get it. So that's why the job search visa is quite a good bridge within it. The other thing which sometimes occurs, and that's why when we're talking on residencia para prácticas and other things, is sometimes people start working and then get a signing bonus later once the employment contract starts. I cannot officially recommend that, but that is a practice quite common in the market because of the delays on the immigration side.
Hi, I was wondering if all of these visas and permits are available for both non-official and official masters, or are they only linked to official masters?
So, the thing on approved institutions, for instance, when you go to a language course, it's not recognized within it. Now, depending on official masters and what gets recognized, which is the classic issue with private universities versus public, your private university, if they are not even recognized as an official master's at the end, it could be a reason for denial, quite often for the job search visa, but in theory, the employment visa shouldn't be blocked underneath it. So the job search visa is more restricted within that. In terms of school, you're doing a full master's program for a full year, right? It's not a 6-month course.
Yes, it's a whole master's program, but it's a non-official master's program within a private university that also has official master's programs.
So if it's unofficial, usually that can create a blocker because effectively an unofficial master's is not regarded as a degree. It's as if you went to a language school or something else in that regard. Now, if you're...
Sorry, even if it's a full-time master's of 60 credits and everything?
Well, that's the thing. For it to be validated as 60 credits, it has to be official.
It's non-official.
Exactly. So where it's recognized within the others. Now, one possibility you can do is whether there's any public recognition of that. Which school are you talking about?
UIC Barcelona.
Weak. Okay. Welcome to the thing of what's the definition of masters and undergrad.
Sorry, just to follow up to that question.
Yeah, please do.
So I work there, and we do have official masters and unofficial masters, but it doesn't mean that the non-official masters are not recognized by the ministry, but they teach you some skills. So the question is more about the time. How much time do you have to study in order to get the visa? So that's why we are not sure if you understand the difference between official and non-official. just to make sure the answer we give the students is the right one.
Completely. What would be really useful on that, if you can pop in an email afterwards, one of my colleagues here will give the details on this. If you could actually give the details of what they are registered under, what is recognized. Because you've got different parts of what's recognized for homologated titles when you're doing professions for licensed careers where they won't be recognized. You then have different areas of what immigration necessarily approves and considers. In theory, if it's unofficial, it's not covered. However, for certain areas, migration has a more relaxed interpretation of it. So if it's recognized by the rest of the European Union as ECT credits, in theory it should be. But if it's not recognized within Spain, it's quite a weird one if it's not recognized within Spain, but it is recognized within it. To give an example, I've actually got a perfect example of that. So I studied at IESE, and when I did my MBA, it was not officially recognized. But it was officially recognized on a European level, and within that, I could have applied to visas. So whereas, as a stupid technicality, I could never officially apply for the Colegio de Gestores, for example, because of it not being official. But there are different grades of this, and this is that's why I was trying to figure out where exactly are we talking from. Because when you said ECTs, I was like, well, then it is recognized on the European basis. Ignacia, wherever my colleague will come across to you afterwards, who's just there actually, and we'll grab your details and follow up on that one.
Thank you.
Welcome to the details of nuance. It's all good in theory, and then you go, okay, so official, unofficial, what's the exact graduation? So now onto a different area, which will be relevant once you guys are setting up and everything else, which is the difference between autónomo profesional and SLs, okay? So these are the two options if you're looking to set up yourself. This is if you're going for the cuenta propia visa, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you're setting up on your own behalf, okay? So when you're setting up on your own behalf, you've got two options. Now, one critical thing I want to be clear with, because this is one thing many people suddenly think, they're like, hey, if I set up a sociedad limitada, I don't need to register as an autónomo. I can save all the social security quotas, I can save those fees. I'm sorry, that's just not true. When you set up an SL, if you own that SL, that limited company, you become an autónomo societario. An autónomo societario is obliged to pay social security, okay? You pay exactly the same as an autónomo profesional, and so you might be thinking, well, why on earth do I want one or the other? With autónomo profesional, which is self-employed in many other countries, you are a sole proprietor. You are the only person who you are working on your own behalf as self-employed, performing the economic activity as you. You can have employees. What's the critical disadvantage? Unlimited liability. So if you screw up and you get sued, you can be pursued on your personal assets up to what you own personally. Now, there are limits. Like one of the things people say is unlimited liability. Well, I'm going to go bankrupt on anything. No, people can't just sue you for anything and get millions of damages. You need to really screw up to go into that area. But where's an area where you could face issues? Employment. If you hire somebody in Spain, there's a concept called despido nulo. So let's say you build up a cafe, you've got it working and going very well, but you lay off a worker and you screw it up. Maybe they had a protected characteristic, they had a reason and it was deemed to be discriminatory. If this is to occur, beyond just indemnizations where you need to pay them, you could be ruled with despido nulo. What happens if you get despido nulo? Despido nulo means you can't fire this person pretty much for any reason. So what often happens at that stage is people negotiate a settlement for the person to voluntarily leave, and you could be burdened with 4, 5, 6 years of salary to pay them for them to go. This is the most common risk which occurs for people who go on the self-employed path. So the biggest area I would say is that your commercial risks are very low. Your risks in most sectors are not significant enough where worrying about autónomo comes in, you get professional liability insurance, and you are pretty well covered. However, if you are looking at employing quite a lot of staff, potentially more permanent contracts and everything else, really consider the limited company path if you are thinking on the entrepreneurial vision. Because labor law can get really complex. You can screw up and you're on the hook potentially for an incredibly long time. And if you don't have a business which is very strong, this can create some real issues for you. So why does the limited company help? Well, because even if that's ruled against you, you'd be limited to the assets within the company. So whatever you've built up to that point, but for instance, your home, your house, you don't need to declare personal bankruptcy if something goes wrong. What are the other advantages? You can raise money from outside investors. If you've got a business which you think you can grow and you're looking for outside investors or capital or collaboration from anyone else in the room, anyone else you might be working with, the SL can be an option. Now, if you have more than 25% of the company and you're working in it, you must register as autonomo societario. What could that mean? There's you and there's your co-founder. Or let's say you've got an investor from overseas. They own half of it, and you're working here as the representative in Spain. Let's say you're doing, I don't know, a coffee importation business, and you're bringing in the product from, let's say, El Salvador. You've got the exportations coming in, and you're selling into the domestic market. You're buying and selling and distributing and everything else. But one of your investors is, let's say you've got a professional investor back home in El Salvador, and collectively you are working, building it up, they have 50% of it. The fact they have a shareholding doesn't require them to register as an autonomo. But if they work in the business and they live in Spain, yes, they would need to register. Now you might think, hey, I can be really clever. I'm going to have 24%, give 74% to people I know and everything, and then I don't need to register as autonomo. Yeah, but then you need to register as an employee, and that's even more expensive because employee social security is 32% and employer social security is 32% and employee 7%. So in general, that's the less preferred option within it. Actually, autonomo is cheaper than in many cases going for the employment side. Actually, just to get a feel on the room, how many people here are looking at potentially working on self-employment or their own business post-graduation? Just to get a feel if it's actually anything significant in it. Okay, it's smaller. But it's notable. That's okay. So it's a decent share. How many people are looking on employment side? Right. Okay. Right. I'm just trying to get the idea where you're going to be. This is going to be less relevant, so I'm going to skip quite quickly over this. Then, autónomo profesional, because this is similar to what you're dealing with anyway. What are the taxes if you do set up as self-employed? Income tax, IRPF. This is a variable tax. It goes from nothing on the first 7.5K up to north of 45% on everything above 60 grand. Social security, in your first year, it's 86 euros a month. This goes up to 294 to 610 euros a month in your second year. If your income is below minimum wage, it can be a little bit less than that. VAT, a sales tax. Basically, whatever you sell in Spain, you need to charge a tax. Usually it's 21%. But if you're exporting, let's say, services, let's say you're a digital nomad and you're consulting for a company overseas. You're registered as self-employed here and you're working for another jurisdiction. Those consulting services are what we call an exportation of business services, and therefore they are VAT exempt. You would not charge any VAT. So if you have business clients outside, but if you're selling within Spain, 21% for most services, 10% restaurants, cafes, this sort of thing, 4% a very small subsection of services. Now, general rule. There's all this complication where, okay, what exactly would be my social security? What exactly would be my income tax? But when you combine it together, it ends up relatively simple. After the introductory first year, which is discounted, on the first 60,000 euros, pretty much whatever you make, you're going to pay 1 in 3 euros in taxes. Because social security and income tax adds up to almost 1 in 3 euros. At a very low income, let's say you're making 15,000 euros, you'll pay 3,600 euros in social security. But if you're making 100,000, you'd pay 7,200. So there's not that much variation. But on income tax, it does the opposite. On 15,000, you'll pay maybe 1,000 euros. And then if the income goes up and surges, and you're on 100,000, you might be paying more like 35, 40,000. So your percentage rate changes dramatically. But when you combine the two taxes, it ends up actually almost perfectly as 1 in 3 euros from 0 to 60,000, and then 60,000 upwards, 45% or higher. Now, with a company, there's a bit of tax changes which you can do, and optimization of switching some of that to dividends. Honestly, this is only if you viably think you're going to be making north of 60, 70, 80,000, right? Below that, the main reason for a company has nothing to do with tax. It's the limited liability that we were talking about before. Now you're like, how much was that? I was used to paying 10, 20. First thing, if you're used to being an employee anywhere else, being self-employed, you suddenly see all the taxes your boss was paying. Because guess what? If you're an employee, your boss is paying 32% in Spain on top of your salary, on top of your gross salary. And then you've got your social security, then you've got your income tax. And you suddenly realize that what you receive at the end of the day, they probably were paying double at the end of the day. So, not too relevant for many of you, but for those who might have a more significant career, and many of you might be thinking, well, Beckham's Law only works if I've just moved here. One of the interesting things is how the tax authorities view estancia de estudios. So when you've come here on a student visa, the tax authorities often make the interpretation that you have not fully moved to Spain, that you are here on a temporary basis. That's one of the reasons why, if you look at your visas towards permanent residency, 2 years on an educational visa only count as 1 year towards residency. Now, under this, the Agencia Tributaria, and this is relevant pretty much only for those who are looking for 53,000 euros or more or have significant overseas assets, Beckham's Law is available. Now, what are the requirements? 5 years of non-tax residence in Spain. If you've been here for an undergrad for like 3 years, 4 years, it's unlikely you're going to be eligible. If you've been here just for a master's for a year, crossing between tax years, it's possible the Agencia Tributaria could view you as temporarily displaced. This is why they've got the concept for the reasons of transfer: employment, contract, digital nomad, entrepreneurship, which is basically setting up a limited company. Investor, kind of ignore that. That's within the SL group. Beckham's Law got extended. Previously, it was just for employment, but it now works for employment for an overseas company, an administrator of a company in Spain, and a couple of other subcategories. With this, what are the benefits? 24% flat rate of income tax. You still need to pay Social Security. Don't forget about that. Wealth tax exemption on non-Spanish assets and tax exemption on international non-labor income. So let's say you've got a flat rented out in a different country. You do not need to worry about paying taxes on that if you're under Beckham's Law. Otherwise, in Spain, like in most countries, you pay tax on your global assets. Now, if you've already paid tax in that other country, you can deduct that. Again, many of you are going, well, this clearly doesn't matter to me. I've got like 5K in my bank and I'm just looking for a job at the moment. However, we're talking to a wide and varied audience, some on the more senior responsibility from previous working experiences, some might have eligibility for this. So if you are within this category, what's the general rule? Why should you be interested? If your income's above 53K, if you've got high earnings growth, so you're just below 53K, but things are going really well for you and you think your career means that in 2 years you're going to be well above that, or you have significant overseas assets earning more than 10,000 euros. Consider Beckham's Law. It's not for you. So now I'm going to open for questions. I will just quickly ask, what time actually is it, if anybody can tell me who has a watch? 6:50. Okay, so having got snookered from a couple of the first questions which came in, thank you for everybody on that. Any questions which I'm unable to answer, I will just quickly highlight. Scan here for free advice. This will be open for any questions where my team, I've got immigration, I've got tax specialists, I've got everybody to cover each of the subcategories. Will be there. And on the UIC question, Ignacio will confirm back just on your specific case what the exact classification occurs on that. Because, as we know, there are certain nuances over approved and unapproved. But for now, I open up to questions. And once we get kicked out of here, we have organized just a little bar if anybody wants to ask questions for half an hour afterwards. I'll be there, probably on a bar stool, holding my head in pain. No, please, questions. Let's go.
Okay, so my question is this. I'm doing my PhD and I'm in third year. So I am more intending to start business by using Amazon. So can I open my account being a student on Amazon? So
what you would do is you do self-employment to register an Amazon account for, you're doing like not fulfilled by Amazon. You're looking to get a web store serving the European market based out of Spain. Yes. Important thing to be aware of on Amazon. Amazon's got some nuances on, depending on which warehouse you save in, you might need to have a separate VAT number for different jurisdictions. But if you start just shipping from everything from the Spanish warehouse, you can just use a Spanish number. But to register in Amazon and make that work, you need to register as an autónomo. It's the self-employed option. Now, the minimum cost will be 86 euros a month in Social Security. But if you start that while you are studying, it's also easier to then convert to self-employed afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the process for the employer if you were to go for the employment visa. So I don't know if you have any kind of compiled information on that, because there's obviously a financial burden for them to maybe get registered or whatever, but what does it actually entail? Because like I worked previously in the humanitarian sector. I'm doing a master's degree, but with a lot of NGOs and the UN agencies, they always require that you are an EU citizen. And so I was thinking that the older laws were still in place of kind of preference. But I'm...
So there's different things. When you're talking with the humanitarian agencies, actually the issue is more different. So one of the things you have is government bodies can discriminate towards only employing... So if they have grants which are coming, so lots of UN agencies get grants from DFID from the UK, but the biggest one, the German, I can't remember the German aid agency.
GIZ.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the caveats within the European Union is they cannot say that you have to come from Germany, but they can say that you have to come from the European Union. So quite often it's to do with grant funding, not to do with visas. So one important thing to always ask at the beginning with any aid agencies or government-backed organisation is ask, is the reason that you're saying that you only hire in this because under your grant you're required to make European hires? Because quite often there are ties which are put on the tying of aid. So a lot of the aid budgets. So it's not to do with the actual immigration blocker on that. The other one, which is very relevant for those who are looking outside of the aid agency, actually this is completely slightly going off the beaten track, but that's one of the big reasons when you're looking for flats, you can find issues. So when you're looking to hire a flat, one of the things they often say is you need a contrato indefinido. One of the reasons is insurance. The reason you need insurance for contrato indefinido is many insurers will not insure unless you've got an indefinite contract against ocupas and everything like that. So like 1 in 5 flats you'll find they'll never rent to you. And it's not because they think you're particularly risky, but it's because they can't get the insurance and they're not going to lend to anyone who has insurance. In the case of humanitarian businesses, this is an issue. If you're working with any business which has defense contractors, has a high level of, as any form of significant industrial secrets of the government or significant government grants or aid, there are often restrictions on hiring and you won't be able to apply for them. For instance, lots of Spanish government roles you can't apply to, basically. Please. On the first part of the question, apologies, because I went on to the other part, which is the most likely blocker. It could be that they don't know within that. And now you've mentioned it, I'm thinking have a nice info pack just that we can give to any employers and they can download is a great idea. And we don't actually have like a nice pre-formed pack on that for onboarding of that. But we will have that soon. So, Ignacia, can you add that to the list of things we need to create? That we've already got it less ordered as a check form, but we can get one for companies to sign up. And I'll actually be happy to share that with Barcelona Activa, who can then, el Ayuntamiento de Barcelona. We're in Barcelona Activa space, but with the Ayuntamiento. Barcelona International Welcome. I know, all the chaos. I get confused. I'm not very good at branding. But we'll send that across. So we'll get that together and send that across to be shared with the same list, which we can have a couple of days later.
All right, great, thank you.
So I want to know, while searching for this visa, what happens if you leave Spain for about a year? When coming back, does it get more difficult, or there's something you can use to hold on for a while?
So that's a really interesting question. So the job search visa, So there's an issue with you getting permanent residency afterwards, because if you break a visa within that period and you spend more than 10 months outside of the country within 5 years prior, it breaks any of the history you have towards permanent residency, okay? But strictly, there's not necessarily significant checks on that. So if you apply for the job search visa and then leave. However, if you leave and not continuing your job search, theoretically, you should inform the Spanish government and rescind your visa at that stage. Now, there aren't exactly that many checks on that and verification. There's not a fully clear process of that. What they could do is say, when you come back in, say, hey, when you come to the EU front, if you basically fly just in and out of Spain, they could say, hang on a second, what's going on? Oh yeah, I should also leave that for scheduling a free consultation. Ignacio was like, remember to put that to make it easier for people. On leaving, there's a possibility they could say that you've ended your search, right? But unless you self-profess to them, they don't really know. And in a way, they don't really care. Because the whole purpose of this was to make it easier for you to then find the job afterwards, to make sure you could remain and stay, because Spain wants to capture valuable talent. So strictly no. Strictly it's okay, or strictly it's not necessarily checked on, shall we say.
So I'm a master's student. I'm finishing in May.
Mm-hmm.
My TA is finishing in May. And then I have my thesis to defend in September. My master's is titolio proprio.
Yep.
The question is, how can I convert my student visa to work visa, acknowledging that my visa would expire in June, and I need to have my thesis in September 24.
Oh, okay. Yes, this is a common issue. So what you can get is, this was a bit of an example where we had a thesis before. If your university is willing to write something saying that you will be graduating, so even though your thesis is pending, that you will be graduating and they recognize it as if, that can be used as a supporting letter. Now, a critical part of that depends on if your thesis is required or the stages you've already done prior to submission, whether you would be able to pass and graduate without it. Otherwise, the university could say, well, I can't say that you're going to graduate until I know your thesis has been delivered. Now, if they know, because of the rest of your grades, it's high enough, and that they can effectively say that we would consider that this person will have graduated at the end of this, that letter, as long as you can get a letter from your university, that can be sufficient. So they give quite a lot of discretion to the university's ability to self-profess. Because if you think, if a university starts lying about this, they just take the license from them to sponsor any visas. And that's something which no university wants to have. So that's where the universities get reticent. But if they have the confidence that you will pass, you've completed your studies, and they can get a letter of that wording, that's sufficient. Does that make sense? So even though you haven't got yet to the thesis. Now, the other thing which is a bit weird is if your actual full term of education is to that point, the fact you weren't approved a visa until the end of your studies, because your studies only finish when your thesis is delivered, is potentially malcommunication, and you should probably have applied for another proroga de estudios to continue until the end of your thesis. And if your university can provide documentation to give you proroga de estudios for that last bit, that is the other alternative.
Is there a way that I could actually extend my TA on pending thesis until September?
Ask your university what they have your official graduation, and then you can theoretically do a proroga de estudios.
So basically there's two options by the university. The first, either the university saying that I'm going to finish in September, so with this I could extend until September, or says I have finished kind of now, but I'm going to graduate.
There's three. There's finished now. The grades mean that he will be graduating and receiving this in September. It's just because the process will be delayed. Or the third one is actually that we recognize the studies are actually continuing longer than what we stated, and they should be prorogad, so extended to that point. It's actually this is an issue which sometimes universities have where they misregister what the actual full length is. And so they say it's 2 years when it's 2 years and 3 months, or 1 year and because of this. But you can get proroga de estudios as well.
Thank you.
But you need your university to validate that your studies are continuing.
Okay, so what if I apply for self-employed visa?
Yep.
This process takes like 6 months to complete, and in these 6 months I have an employment contract. Like I can still like apply for one methodology.
Yes, you can convert
the
afterwards.
papers and then apply for another type of.
Yes, you can convert, and the recommendation of that is actually start registering as self-employed as a student. Apply to convert and continue on as a self-employed, and then you can then, once you've got the self-employed approved, if you then have an employment opportunity, you can then convert across. One of the things which is interesting in Spain is generally, once you are here and achieved under a working visa, it's quite a good country to move between the couple of different visas within it. You might hit a roadblock on one of them changing between one employment and the other one, and it could get a bit delayed. But in general, they will approve, as long as it meets the basic standards, which is basic paying minimum wage, which is not the same. And most countries do not have that. Most countries require at least minimum of the average wage of the country. So it's a much lower threshold.
Yeah, and what if, okay, so this self-employed visa gets approved, I'm on a self-employed journey.
Yep.
I'm not making enough money, and I got a job offer. I can accept that because I have a work permit.
You don't have a work permit as employed, but you can then apply for the conversion across. Usually it's a lot quicker when you're converting from already and you've got a job offer and contract, you can bring that across. This is it. The other thing, which sometimes is a possibility if you're self-employed at that point, is potentially be a self-employed contractor to the employment until you convert and then become an employee.
Right.
So this is the way of slightly working around. Please, the gentleman in green. I'm slightly worried. He's looking down at his phone. That means that there's a long question. Okay, let's go.
Okay, if my girlfriend is studying a master of an architecture, and if she has a work contract with a company with a student visa, the company needs to sponsor her before the visa expires in order to stay. Like, what is the sponsor exactly? Because she doesn't know.
So just repeat the question, just to make sure I'm not... please.
She's finishing the master in next October.
Yep.
And she has an interview tomorrow for a company.
Yep.
And she needs to know if the company need to sponsor her once the master finish in February.
So she can work up to 30 hours a week while she's doing her studies for the architecture firm with no issue. Once she gets towards graduation, they need to offer a full-time job for 40 hours, and they would need to sponsor her visa. But for sponsorship, they just need to basically not have debts with the tax authorities or social security debts, and not have got in trouble with immigration previously. So at this stage, my advice would be her securing and getting the foot in the door and securing the job. Do not raise the immigration fear on the other side, because the other side might not know that it's not that hard to sponsor. So the best thing to do is get the job, lock in, be working with the compatibilización where you can work and study together. And then once she's in and it's work, it's like, hey, can we talk how this is going to work? Because then, well in advance, she can plan already getting the job contract, getting the formal offer, which is then used for her application. They would need to sponsor, but I wouldn't disrupt getting hired by asking that just this minute, because they might think that they can't sponsor when they can.
Hi, good evening. What if we only have a business idea, but we're looking to join accelerator programs? I graduate in July, but then the accelerator program would be from June to December. What kind of visa would we apply for in that case?
Self-employed.
Self-employed. Okay.
Because entrepreneurship's not going to, if you're just early stage in accelerator, is too little. But the letter of acceptance from an accelerator could improve your chances on the self-employment visa. And guys, thank you very much from me. I know there'll be a couple of last words over there, so I will pass back.
Well, only one thing. You will receive the PowerPoint presentation if you have registered. We're going to send all the people who has registered to this event the PowerPoint. The company offers this free advice. We are not responsible on that. We are the City Council. We organize events all the year round. If you are registered to our newsletters, you can know about other events that you might be interested, or you can follow our social media for our events. So I think we need a big applause to him. And he's willing to continue. You have questions in a bar, in a cafe?
Cafe bar. It's somewhere we found with cheap drinks, we think, just round the corner. Basically, I didn't want to go to the really expensive ones in Gloria, so we've gone just that way.
We are sorry, but we have to leave this auditorium. But I think, thank you so much. It has been very interactive, very interesting. A lot of questions has been done. Thank you so much.